I'm putting together, this is going to be the final video in the Cummins build. The truck is out of here. It didn't leave running, but it left. It didn't leave running because, not that it wouldn't run, it didn't leave running because it didn't have the support systems, wiring, plumbing support systems that it needed. I was running into an issue at the end of it, after I got the engine back into the truck, of the wiring of the truck and the plumbing of the truck needed to be corrected, modified, whatever, to support the engine. There was issues of it from before this guy bought the truck. The previous owner had cobbed a lot of things together on this truck, and they were coming to the point where they were failing, breaking down, weren't working. And there was a lot of things that had to be fixed on this truck to support the engine running, rewiring, plumbing issues. So, what the problem was, a lot of the problem was, is something came up in my personal life. I have a family member that's got medical issues, and I was spending a lot of time taking her to doctors and stuff like that. So I really didn't have a lot of time to spend in the shop working on this thing. And he needed a vehicle back. He needed the truck to be able to use as a daily driver. He was running out of loaner vehicles that he could use in the time that the truck was in the shop. So the engine got back in. Everything, that I put into previous videos had worked. The larger valves were installed in the heads. I kind of showed how to mill the heads out to accept those larger valves and everything. So everything worked. The only problem, the reason the truck left here, is because of the support systems supporting the engine from working. So I'm going to put together this last video. The video is about some of those issues, about how the fuel was backfeeding into the nozzles from the nozzle return lines, and you're going to see that. The only thing is, you won't see is the truck starting and driving out of here for the final time. So everything else is good. The truck is gone, and everything that was done to the engine is good. It just doesn't have the support systems. The support system from the truck, the electrical system or the plumbing systems, and from the engine build components, it doesn't have that enhanced P pump or the larger turbo to support those systems. So this is going to be the final video, and again, everything that was done to that engine, putting in the larger valves and everything, would work fine. It just needs some other things that apparently you didn't have money to use. So last video, hope you enjoy. Let me kind of explain to you what I got going on here. Hopefully you can see it. This part right down here is called the fuel solenoid. And what it does is, it's the way you turn on and off a diesel engine. It actually, sorry for the shaking, it actually kills the fuel to the engine. That's how you turn the diesel engine on and off. When I was fixing the oil leaks back before we started building the engine, he had a problem with this fuel solenoid. He bought a new one. Now they're expensive. I don't remember what he paid for it. I want to say he bought it and brought it to me. I want to say that he paid $225, $250, somewheres around there for that fuel solenoid. I put it on the engine and fixed the other things that I needed to fix at the time. I think we were fixing oil leaks, but probably oil leaks. Well, I don't remember what it was. Put the fuel solenoid on. I started the truck up, it drove fine. I drove it around. I shut it off. I started a couple of more times. I called him. He came over, picked it up, and took it and started it 3 or 4 times, and it was fine. And then it wouldn't start again. It was the fuel solenoid. Now, there could be a couple of issues with that fuel solenoid. One of the things is it could be a bad solenoid, or the other thing is it could be having bad voltage to it. Now, rebuilt the engine, putting it back together to the point where I want to get it started before I put the rest of it back together, before I put the radiator back on, before I put the intercooler or the intercooler on, put the grills and everything back on. I wanted to just get it started, run it, kind of make sure the valves are working fine, make sure we're getting oil, make sure everything is fine before I put it all back together. I kind of hooked up the electronic, the AirDog fuel pump temporarily. You can see the wires are just kind of stuck in the battery here. I've got the wire that actually activated when it's activated only when the key's on. This goes into the fuse box, and this wire actually is the wire to activate it only when the key is on the on position, the ignition. So I've got that run over to the fuse box temporarily. I've got everything done. My problem is I can't get the friggin' fuel solenoid to hold again. Before, what would happen was, for some reason, the fuel solenoid wouldn't open, but you could turn the key on, come out here, and manually pull the fuel solenoid up, and it would stay latched. Now it won't do anything. So I can't start the engine unless I bypass that fuel solenoid. But what I want to try and find out is what the hell is wrong with that fuel solenoid. So what I'm going to do is, I've got a meter here. I'm going to run a couple of tests onto the plug and make sure that we're getting proper voltages to it. So just kind of bear with me. No plug for Tim Hortons here. Well, I am getting 12 volts through it. Now there's 3 prongs in here. I've got to assume that one prong opens it up. One prong actually holds it open after it's initially opened. And the other one's probably like a ground. But I've got 12 volts on the one prong, and I actually need somebody else here to turn it on so that I can check and see what's going on. So I'm kind of waiting for my grandson to come over and give me a hand. So I'll bring you back. Just going to give you a brief view of what's going on here. I think I previously explained about the solenoid. Well, I can't get the solenoid to initially open up. And again, it could be a problem with the voltage going to it, or it could be a problem with the relay, or it could be a problem with the solenoid. However, I did get it to, before, I couldn't even get it to hold open when I energized it. Sometimes when the relay or the solenoid goes, if you, usually it's a relay or a voltage problem. But anyways, when you turn the ignition on, you can actually come out here and manually pull the solenoid up and it'll lock in position. I couldn't get that to do it when I was initially trying to start the engine. I have gotten that far, but then Um, I got it to lock open and I wasn't getting any fuel. And it turns out that the air dog, the electric fuel pump, I'm not getting any fuel through it. It's running, but I'm not getting any fuel through it. So my next problem is to figure out what's going on with that. So I'll bring you back when I know more about it or when I get involved into it. Okay, so what I did was I went out and got some diesel fuel and put it in the filters. It said it's self-priming, but it said you may have to put fuel in the filters. So I went out and I tried it. Now, to begin with, there was fuel already in the air water separator, but there was no fuel in the regular fuel filter. So I went out and got diesel fuel. I put it in the regular filter, and I opened the line up going into the P pump and put the end of the line in a can, and I got diesel fuel out of it now. Now, whether I'm only getting diesel fuel out of from what was in the filter or not is to be seen, but we're gonna try. I'm gonna throw a little clip in here. There's a couple of things. The video is done kind of helter skelter. Um, I address some issues, and then the next footage is entirely something else. So I just want to explain something. I did get the solenoid to work, and at this point, I'm really not sure what was wrong with it or why it was wrong. Now, I did go out and get another relay, but that relay in itself didn't start that fuel solenoid working. To begin with, I had a probe that where I could run power into the solenoid when it was out. Well, I could do it while it was in or out. I put the would take the solenoid off of the bracket and just put it out on the truck, and I couldn't test both functions at once, but I could get it to open, or I could get it to hold open. Put it back on and do it, and it wouldn't work. So I went out and got a relay and put the relay on, and it still didn't work. What I did is took the solenoid out and adjusted the throw lever a little bit, which really shouldn't have affected the solenoid from working or not working, but it actually did. So I'm not really sure if there still isn't an issue with the fuel solenoid. A wiring problem with maybe in the original harness of the thing. So whether that fuel solenoid will continue to work, I have no idea. The other thing that wasn't really addressed was the fuel pump. I explained to you that I had gone out and bought some fuel and put it into the primary fuel filter and put it in and got fuel out of it. What I never explained in the video was that it only ran the fuel out that I had put in the filter, and then it stopped pumping again. Now, one of the things I thought of was there fuel in the tank? So I got a hold of the guy. He says, "Oh yeah, when I gave you the truck, it had half a tank of fuel in it." Well, apparently it didn't. I went out and bought 10 gallons of fuel and put it in the fuel tank, and I got the pump to work fine. So those two things weren't really explained because it took a long period of time. I didn't really film it. It was like a trial and error thing. Go out and get fuel and stick it in the tank after the guy told you that the tank was half full, and Um, I just went out and bought some fuel and stuck it in there and got the fuel filter or got the pump working fine. Actually disconnected it off of the P pump and let it run into a can for a while, and it was working fine. But it was kind of like a trial and error, and I really didn't film it. And because I didn't film it, it never got mentioned in the video. So those two things are kind of covered in this. Just shooting a little video here. I'm going to be taking the fuel return line off of the injectors to try and figure out. Can't get it to start for some reason, and I have a suspicion that the new fuel pump is maybe backfeeding into the injectors. Why I have that suspicion, I have no idea, but I don't like the plumbing arrangement for that fuel return lines. We kind of the owner and I kind of came, or the owner, let's put it, the owner came up with the idea of tying it into the existing fuel return line from the Dodge's existing fuel return line, and I kind of think it might be overpressurizing that line and backfeeding pressure into the injector. But I'll find out here in a minute. What I'm going to do is just fire the pump up and see if what happens if fuel is coming out of it. And it is. Not sure if you saw that or not, but it is. Let me figure out what I can do. I'm gonna bring you back. What I'm gonna be doing is I pulled these injector return lines off of here. I'm just gonna put it back together to kind of just keep the parts in place. I've got to redo the return lines. There's this injector return line, there's a return line off of the P pump, and there's a return line from the electric fuel pump, the air dog, and it's backfeeding into the injectors. Now, I'm not really sure if that's part of the problem with the engine not starting under fuel, but I've got to eliminate that, kind of start eliminating one thing at a time. So I'm going to work on that. I'm going to take the intake manifold off so that I've got better access to it. So I'll bring you back. I kind of left you off on the last segment is saying that I was going to pull the intake out. So what I did is I just out of a whim pulled one of the injectors out, and just to take a look at it, see if it was clean. But I blew in through the fuel return line out of there, and it does blow into the injector. So if I'm actually pressurizing the fuel return line by the pump or something, I've got fuel going into those injectors all the time. So I've got to pull that return line apart and start there, like I said before. Um, I just kind of wanted to see it for myself to see if that fuel did actually flow through there, and it does. Just kind of show you this. I'm putting that injector back together. This first injector is really kind of like a little pain in the ass to get it apart because of this lifting bracket for the engine. Man, it's right in the way. Well, I'm kind of doing this piddly work. It's kind of going through the back of my mind as to how I am going to get, how I can test this thing, how I can disconnect them return lines without having to come up with a bunch of other plumbing to and kind of test it to see if that's it before I get extensively involved in it. No doubt that it's got to be changed, but I would kind of like to see, is that the kind of the root cause of the engine not starting? I'm going to just grab some tape to tape them off in case the ignition gets turned on before I put them back together. So hang on. Just stuffing a rag in there so nothing falls in. Show you a little video here. One of the issues that I had was the guy that owns the truck wanted to get the we went to put the fuel line back together, or the fuel lines from the new pump up into it and the return lines back out of it, and kind of cobbed it together and tried to run the fuel return line from the new AirDog pump and the fuel return lines from the injectors and the P pump all together back into the tank through what the previous owner had originally done was run all the return lines back in through using the original existing Dodge fuel return line, and it didn't work. So I had to get a hold of AirDog. I really didn't want to take the tank out at this point in time and redo the tank filler and return lines from the top of the tank. So AirDog does make a fill tube adapter to run the return line back in. Now they didn't provide it with a kit, but they do make it. So I got a hold of AirDog, and I got one of them, and this is it in the line. Now, it's not totally together yet. I've still got to get some more clamps on it. Actually, when I took the existing, I'm kind of glad that we did this, because when I took the existing fill line out, somebody had drilled a hole through the bed of the truck and drilled a hole right into the top of the fill line. So I got a hold of AirDog. I got the T. I went to a local automotive shop and got some new hose for the fill line. And I got the T in there. Again, I've got to put some more clamps on. I just kind of wanted to show it to you. It's kind of in an awkward position to get filmed and shown. But there is the return line connected to the tank fill line. So I've still got to do some plumbing down below. That blue hose is the direct link from the AirDog pump, the fuel return line from the AirDog pump. I've still got to tie in the fuel return line from the P pump. I will tee it into this line also, and then what I'll do is I'll run the fuel return lines from the injectors back separately through another line, so that it doesn't mix. Because what I had happening was that during idle, there's so much fuel coming out of the AirDog through the return line that it was flooding the injectors with fuel. It was actually backfeeding up into the injector return line and flooding the injectors with fuel. So this is kind of the solution to fix that problem.